Delegating tasks means you're avoiding the hard work and just being lazy. That is absolutely not true, and I'm going to talk you through why that is. Hello and welcome to Engage and Thrive, also known as EAT, your coffee catch-up with me, your host, Taelon, where we will go through common problems and hurdles that come up in business, marketing and advertising and try and demystify them. I know firsthand how complicated and confusing it can seem with all the different acronyms and all the things to do in business. So let me try and help you be better in business. First things first, let's start with grabbing a coffee. I feel like this misconception is so deeply rooted in a bad trend of hustle culture. And what I mean by hustle culture is this thought that if you're not working all the time and doing everything, then you're not valuable. So whether you're a business owner or a business leader, everything should rely on you and you should be doing it all at once, everything, everywhere. But actually it's quite the opposite. And if you are doing everything and giving into hustle culture, then you're potentially stunting the growth of your team or of your business, because if you're trying to do everything, there's an opportunity to breathe and then you're likely to just burn out. And so you end up not working hard because you're just doing lots of stuff and never actually getting through things. I know this is hard to hear, but if you're doing everything and you're not delegating, you're not a hero, you're just harming yourself. As always, let's go through vocab. The first one being delegation, assigning responsibility of outcomes while maintaining strategic overview. Ownership, the mindset of caring about an outcome, not just a task. Oversight, staying informed and involved. Bottleneck, a single point where progress stalls. Opportunity cost, what you're missing out on by you doing the wrong task. And the final one, SOP, standard operating procedures. This sounds very corporate, but actually what it means is documenting how things should be done to keep things consistent. Number one, when is it time to delegate? From personal experience, I know that this can creep up without you realizing, and you only kind of notice it when you have that never-ending to-do list, or you end up rearranging your to-do list based on who's going to want your attention next or first or more urgently. And actually, you should have been delegating a long time before that. Or other times you may be completely burnt out, or even starting to feel bored with doing certain tasks and activity. These are all traits and signs that you should be delegating, or you're doing the wrong task for your skill set. The other traits that you may notice is you're running out of hours in the day and you're working 15 to 18 hours, but there's still so much more to do. Or the fact that your team isn't growing or your projects aren't moving on and you can't work out why. That's probably when you're being the bottleneck, when you're holding things up because you're wanting to sign things off, or you're wanting to review things to make sure it's perfect, or to make sure that it's exactly how you want it to be, which we'll get to in a moment about that. And a lot around delegating is actually a mindset change of understanding that it's okay to delegate and that you can still be involved with projects when you're delegating. You just need to have the right processes in place and understand what to delegate. And I know it can be easier said than done about needing to delegate or needing more hands. And what you have to think about is the opportunity cost, as mentioned in the vocab. So this is when you're thinking about the task that you're doing. If someone else was doing it, what could you be doing? So the phrase I always get told by my business mentor is I shouldn't be working in the business, I should be working on the business. So as a business owner or a leader, you should be looking after the more strategic tasks. And the other way of thinking about it is how much would it cost you for someone else to do that task versus your cost to the business for you doing that task. So if you think of the likes of creating social content or editing a website, how much would it cost for you to get someone else to do that? And then you could be building the business and generating more revenue. So your costs are then covered because you would be costing the business more if you were doing it. Number two, how to delegate better. As I lightly touched on, this is a bit of a mindset shift as well when it comes to delegating. And I know very early in my career, I found it quite difficult to understand how you prioritize what you should delegate. And as a person who's a bit of a perfectionist, it can be really hard to delegate because you think to yourself, well, they're not going to do it how I like it, or they're not going to do it to my standards. Firstly, you need to get over that. And secondly, put processes in place to feel more comfortable around that. So for example, having standard operating procedures, SOPs, will then fill that comfort zone of doing it to your standard. So if there's a certain way you like things done, whether it's editing a document, formatting a presentation, whatever it is, create that documentation to standardize that process, even down to the point where you can record a Loom of you actually doing that edit or that process or that formatting. And then you can write a document up as well with that video, but it's showing step by step how you would do it. People have different learning styles and people have different ways of processing information. So if you're only documenting it, people may interpret what you've written slightly differently. So you could cover both bases. You've got a video and you have a document showing the way you like things done. The other thing with having SOPs is you've then obviously laid out the process that you would like followed, or the standardization or whatever it is. And then this thing gives people the opportunity to ask questions or challenges that they have that you haven't captured in that document. Or they may ask about doing something differently to how you do it because they found a quicker way of doing it, or this is something that they've tried in a different business. And actually it can then improve the way you've been doing things. The other thing you need to think about is focusing on the outcome, not the task. So at the end of the day, the brief is going to be as good as you give, will be as good as the outcome you get. So if you're setting a task, think about the outcome, the way you want things delivered to you, rather than necessarily the nitty-gritty detail of how that person's going to get there. And this obviously sounds like I'm contradicting the SOP. It's just there are different reasons why you may have an SOP versus allowing people to have the opportunity to deliver an outcome. Again, as someone who is particular or a bit of a perfectionist and being very used to doing project management, I always add in a buffer of allocation of time if you're delegating tasks. So make sure you've got that time allocated for you to review things, not micromanaging, but having the relevant check-ins and reviews with your team members to see how they're doing and give that ability to give feedback or make any changes. And especially if it's the first few times you're getting someone to do an activity, then give yourself even more of a buffer. And then again, if you are then delivering on to a client or a supplier, add in even more of a buffer of time. Something that I find really helpful when understanding what to delegate isn't the same as prioritizing tasks. This is understanding about delegating tasks and activities based on you. So again, going back to early in my career, I'd had a business coach when I was in a leadership role in an agency. And my business coach had drawn these 4 box quadrants with pound signs in. 1 pound sign, 2 pound signs, so £1, £10, £100, £1,000. And obviously you can change those numbers whatever you would like it to be. But the idea is then you put in your activities or your tasks or your to-do list into those 4 quadrants to understand the value of those tasks. So therefore, how much revenue you would be generating by doing those tasks. And that's where you can understand how to delegate, what you should not be focusing on. Again, going back to the point, as a business owner or a business leader, you want to be thinking about those high ticket value items, the one with the £4 signs in, £1,000, thousands of pound signs. So if you're thinking about the first quadrant being £1, this is low value, low effort. Essentially, these are the tasks that you need to delete. They need to be so far removed from your to-do list, you're not thinking about them, which obviously immediately delegate them, automate it, or just outright get rid of them. So if you're thinking of the likes of checking notifications on your social channels all the time, or community management, or unnecessary approvals where you could just trust your team to do that, or even as simple as checking vanity metrics on social media, none of that adds any value to your role and your day. The next quadrant along being £2 signs, so this would be £10 worth of value. Again, obviously adapt these how you would, it's just £1. This is low value, high effort. So these are things that you want to be delegating because it's a low value, but it's a high effort. So it needs the energy of someone in your team to be doing it, delivering it, overseeing it, hand holding that task and activity the whole way through to the outcome. This can be things like basic research, formatting presentations, repurposing content, creating social content, doing website updates, scheduling meetings. Again, all important things with high effort needed, but low value. Now, the next one you want to be thinking about is your £3 sign, so your £100 value, your high effort, high value. This is the stuff that you want to be systemizing. This is stuff that you want to be doing and having a constant heartbeat of doing. So this is your strategic planning, this is your investor decks, this is your leadership meetings, this is your growth reviews, this is client meetings, this is press, this is strategy. This is the stuff where you're working on the business, not in the business. Now, this is important that you do this. You keep this to yourself. So you do you. Which in another breath is going to be interesting when I say to you, if you're thinking about low effort, high value, so £4 signs, this is stuff that you potentially want to be deferring or automating because it's low effort, but it's high value. So how could you be having this ticking over in the background of things that should be happening that you're aware of, you're involved in, you're still in charge of, but it's happening automatically as part of your role. So you're not delegating these ones. So these may be things like monthly reports. It's an automated monthly report and then you're going to review it because it's already been created and then you're going to do the do on it. This may be reoccurring invoices, so whether you are sending invoices to clients or whether you need to pay invoices, again, these can be automated. They are low effort with high value. Another one is CRM updates, so actually following up with leads that you have, making sure that you're doing your check-in points with that lead. Is it 1 day, 3 days, 10 days, whatever it is? Again, you can automate those reminders or you could automate those emails of follow-up in that customer experience. Again, low effort, high value. I'm fully aware it might be quite difficult to visualize this matrix because you're hearing me talking about it and trying to imagine those 4 quadrants. So I will link in the show notes an example of a delegation matrix, but the idea is to use this matrix to decide where your energy and time is going and therefore what you should be deleting and what you should be delegating. As a wrap up, delegating is not about working any less harder. It's actually about working smarter, because the more you're delegating or understand where you need to delegate, the more likely you are to scale and grow your team and your business. And remember, when I'm talking about delegating, it doesn't only mean hiring a full-time person. You can hire part-time people, fractional people, freelancers, contractors, or even think about the automations you could be putting in place, especially with AI nowadays. There's so many things you could be getting AI to do for you. Those tasks when we're talking about the ones you should be deleting and the ones you should be automating. This is your sign to protect your time and energy, because if you're not delegating now, you're going to need to be delegating at some point, at some day, and hopefully it's before you're getting to that endless to-do list and feeling burnt out and bored. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Engage and Thrive with your host Taelon, and see you next week.